The year is 1990 in Scarborough, Ontario, and 24-year-old Robert Baltovich has just recently graduated with a degree in psychology and history from the University of Toronto at Scarborough. The university is where Robert met his girlfriend, Elizabeth Bain. Robert sincerely loved Elizabeth and believed that the two would someday be married. However, on the afternoon of June 19, 1990, around 4:00 p.m., Elizabeth tells her mother that she is going to check the tennis schedule at the school campus, but she never returns. Elizabeth's mother reports her to be missing the next evening. 3 days after her disappearance, Elizabeth's car is found just 1 kilometer from her home with blood in the back seat. Elizabeth's body is nowhere to be found. Robert Baltovich is put under surveillance, and the Toronto Police Homicide Squad takes over the investigation. Baltovich is asked to provide forensic samples during an interrogation lasting several hours. Police find him to be suspicious. Massive searches of the Greater Toronto Area are conducted in the days following Bain's disappearance, but her body is never found.
In the days that followed, the confusion and terror of having to confront Liz's disappearance and the possibility that she might have been the victim of foul play culminated in an interview with the Toronto Police Homicide Squad, during which time I was told that I had murdered the woman that I loved.
5 months after her disappearance, Robert Baltovich is arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his girlfriend. The Crown drops Baltovich's charge to second-degree murder after portraying him as a possessive lover who killed Bain in a jealous rage when she attempted to break up with him. Baltovich continues to maintain his innocence. The Crown's first witness, Marianne Purrs, testifies that she saw Robert sitting with Elizabeth on campus at 5:40 p.m. on the evening of her disappearance. David Dibben, another witness, testifies that he had seen Robert driving around in Elizabeth's car 3 days after her disappearance on June 22nd, the day that the vehicle was found with the blood in the back seat. There are questions as to whether the testimony of these witnesses could be considered reliable. The biggest controversy with Marianne's testimony is that she implicated Robert by picking him out of a photo lineup. However, she was hypnotized. David's testimony is also controversial. He claimed that he wasn't really paying attention and did not have a good view of the driver. On March 31, 1992, Robert Baltovich is found guilty of the second-degree murder of Elizabeth Bain. He is sentenced to life in prison with no parole eligibility for 17 years. A glimmer of hope appears in Baltovich's case when Paul Bernardo is arrested as the Scarborough rapist on February 17, 1993. Baltovich's lawyers suspect that Bernardo is Elizabeth Bain's real killer, and a private investigator claims to find evidence tying him to Bain.
The weeks turned into months and then years, and by the winter of 1999, I had begun to think my appeal might never be heard. Depressed and tired of waiting for an appeal that seemed to be taking forever, I made a call to James Lockyer and asked him to take carriage of my appeal. It was a call that would change my life forever.
James Lockyer, the director of the Association in Defense of the Wrongfully Convicted, now called Innocence Canada, joins Baltovich's case. On March 15, 2000, Lockyer argues at the bail hearing that there is new evidence that suggests Baltovich did not kill Elizabeth Bain and that Paul Bernardo is the real culprit. He also suggests that Baltovich should be released on bail while awaiting his appeal. On March 31, 2000, after spending 8 years in jail for a crime he did not commit, Robert Baltovich is granted bail and released from prison. Finally, on April 22, 2008, Robert Baltovich's 18-year nightmare is over. The verdict of his second trial reveals that he is not guilty for the murder of Elizabeth Bain.
It's an 18-year nightmare for me. It's a never-ending nightmare for the Bains. I just hope that one day they can come to accept the fact that I didn't kill their daughter. I loved her. I missed her. I know they do. And maybe one of these days we can get together and grieve together. For the better part of the last 18 years, you wake up, you're an accused murderer, then a few years later you're a convicted murderer, then you're no longer a convicted murderer. It's just living with the idea that it's never really over until now.
I lived through an 18-year nightmare. I'm just glad it's over. No more bail, no more convictions, no more charges. I get to live the rest of my life free.
Tunnel vision occurs when police officers become overeager and focused on a specific theory and start to take shortcuts that lead to the conviction of the main suspect. This happened in the Baltovich case. The police were quick to make an assumption that Robert was insecure in his relationship with Elizabeth and painted him as a jealous boyfriend who became murderous when he thought she would break up with him. Additionally, the investigators failed to follow other leads. At the time of Bain's disappearance, Paul Bernardo, the Scarborough rapist, had been sexually assaulting women in the area surrounding Bain's home. Bernardo was known to the police and was even asked to provide DNA evidence in connection with the rapes the day after Baltovich was arrested. However, the police did not believe the Scarborough rapist was responsible for the crime because he was not known to have murdered his victims after raping them. This was later discovered to be untrue, as Bernardo murdered at least 3 of his victims. The failure to identify Bernardo as a possible suspect displays how the police had tunnel vision towards Baltovich as the likely perpetrator.
My view on Bernardo's participation in this crime is that he probably committed the crime. Can I say that it could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt? No, I couldn't. But I think he probably did it, and I think the evidence shows he probably did it.
The media can also contribute to tunnel vision. Heinous crimes reported in the media create systemic pressure on the police to convict a perpetrator, as communities become panicked when there is a potential murderer at large. Before Baltovich's trial, an article in the Toronto Sun suggested that Robert was a suspect in the case and even included a picture of him. This article greatly contributed to the tunnel vision of the police and the community. Judicial malpractice occurs when a judge compromises a defendant's right to a fair trial. The judge at Baltovich's trial was extremely biased towards the Crown's case and persuaded the jury's conclusion with his own opinions. He inappropriately made crude remarks about Baltovich during the trial, suggesting that his short haircut was an attempt to confuse potential witnesses and that his alibi was concocted. The doubt cast on Baltovich by a professional severely damaged his defense, as the jury was convinced to be skeptical of him. The judge also failed to instruct the jury that eyewitness testimony might not be reliable. This caused the jury to rely too heavily on the faulty testimony of the witnesses. Overall, Baltovich's right to a fair trial was greatly compromised by the bias of the judge. Eyewitness testimony is when a person witnesses a criminal act and testifies to what they saw or heard in court. It is important to note that eyewitness testimony is the leading cause of wrongful convictions. Eyewitnesses are only human, and they often make errors and cause innocent people to be convicted. There were many problems with the eyewitnesses chosen by the Crown to testify against Baltovich. First, witness Marianne Purse saw a man with Bain on campus the day she disappeared, but she wasn't completely certain of his description. Later, however, she saw Baltovich's face in the Toronto Sun, which may have caused her memory to be changed by the misinformation effect, the impairment of past memories that develops after exposure to misleading information. Seeing Baltovich as the number one suspect in the media may have caused Marianne to believe that the man she saw with Bain was him. In addition, Marianne's evidence was enhanced by hypnosis. Individuals can be very suggestible under hypnosis, and memories can become harder to distinguish from imagination. Next, police presented Marianne with a photo array, several photos at once, rather than a sequential lineup. And an array is not a good option to secure a valuable testimony. Purse chose Baltovich out of the lineup as the person who best fit her description. Marianne even testified at the trial that she had picked out Robert's photo by a process of elimination. What is even more shocking is that the officer who directed the lineup informed Marianne that Rob's photo is in the group. This information would likely persuade Marianne to believe Baltovich to be the perpetrator, perhaps making her search out his photo. It is important to mention that to avoid suggestion, an unbiased officer should be conducting the photo lineup. The other key witness, David Dibben, had revealed that he wasn't paying close attention to the driver of the car he saw. His original description of the driver was not close to Baltovich's appearance whatsoever. However, his description changed to match Robert as the case moved on. The testimonies of these eyewitnesses were highly unreliable and the Crown's main evidence against Baltovich. The jury relied too heavily on these testimonies, which ultimately resulted in Baltovich's guilty conviction. Wrongful convictions are extremely complex matters that are the result of many different systemic and agentic factors. It is impossible to conclude what would have happened had the case been handled differently. The justice system needs to be aware of what went wrong and use Baltovich's case as a learning experience so that tragic miscarriages of justice do not result from these mistakes in the future.
The criminal justice system is a human system. If you think about it, it's one of the last surviving relics of the human system, because it is so dependent on human beings. It's dependent on human beings through the police that investigate the case, through the prosecutors who prosecute the case, through the defense counsel who defend the case, through the judges who preside over the trial, through the jurors who decide the case as they listen to the human witnesses who either lie or tell the truth, or get it right or get it wrong when they testify on the case. Why should we be surprised that in that process there are bound to be, on many occasions, mistakes?
The Association in Defense of the Wrongly Convicted was created in 1993, and it really has two purposes: to try and uncover wrongful convictions that have already occurred, to prevent them happening in the future as much as we can.